Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Ad Astra Kansas Money Talks podcast. I'm Joe Blubaugh, and I'm joined, as always, by Mark Johnson and Bob Schwartz of Bob Schwartz Financial. They have offices in Victoria and in Silver Lake, Kansas, and you can find out more on how to contact them at bobschwartzfinancial.com. And today's topic is a very important one. It's more not really about wealth accumulation, but kind of what do you do with it once you've got it. And we're going to talk about estate planning. And estate planning is critically important when it comes to not only as you kind of go through your lifetime and build wealth, but then especially having it in place to make sure that your wealth is passed along the way that you want it to, and to protect some of those assets as well. So we're going to spend a little bit of time about talking about that today. Once again, before we get started, if you are watching us on YouTube, we would really hope that you could subscribe to us and give us a thumbs up. And one of those ratings on Google Podcast, or I guess there's no Google Podcast anymore, but yeah. Apple Podcast or Spotify, any of those places where you're finding your podcast, we would really appreciate that as well. So, Mark, let's take a little bit of time to talk about what is estate planning and maybe give us a quick overview on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. The first thing is, today we're probably going to more talk about like when to start it, who needs it, and that question. I think do I really need estate planning? I'm 26 years old. I'm married. I have a little kid, but we don't have very much money. That answer is yeah, you definitely do. And it looks a little different from when you're 26 maybe and not have very much, or to when you're 65 and you're retiring and have accumulated a lot of money. It might look a little different, but it's great to start young, and there's a lot of different things we're going to talk about here, but pretty much you're ensuring that your assets and your affairs are all taken care of how you want them to. So
yeah, and I would think, as you mentioned, that 26-year-old with a child, that child part becomes very important, because part of these, when you talk about estate planning, you think physical assets, but we're also talking things like healthcare directives. Who's going to be the guardian of a child if, God forbid, both parents would pass away? There's a lot to consider when it comes to estate planning, more beyond just your wealth at that point.
Yeah. So the first thing that, if you're that, like I said, that 26-year-old that had, just had a kid, maybe it is time to think about, hey, I need to get with my spouse and we need to start talking about a will. A will is how, you're directing how your assets are distributed after death, but you're also directing who's going to take care of that kid if you and your spouse both die, who's going to take the dog, who's going to take, your things that you don't obviously want to think about. But, if something happens, you want to make sure these things are taken care of.
Yeah, unfortunately, bad things happen to good people on a daily basis. And we never know when today's going to be our last. So having that will in place, just critically important if you have a minor child, for sure.
Yeah, and really wills are a pretty inexpensive, thing to do. You can get online, and you can even do them. You can buy kits at the store. I mean, it's a pretty inexpensive, procedure that you can get done.
Yeah, you don't need to spend a lot of money to have a basic will done at all.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Bob. In your years of experience, have you seen kind of the bad side of this, where somebody has unexpectedly passed away and did not have a will in place?
I have certainly seen it. I've heard stories from attorneys that we've worked with, telling just unbelievable stories about how things can get messed up. But you don't, and most of the stories you hear are, in the case of young people, maybe there's an accident and both parents are gone, and they have not made a directive on who they want to take care of raising their children. And of course, in a case like that, there's a lot of people that want to raise those children, grandparents, brothers, sisters. And what that means? That means probably some type of litigation has to occur to decide who's going to take care of those children, and there's going to be feelings hurt. And if a younger couple will go ahead and name who's going to be the guardian of those children until they reach the age of majority, that helps keep family peace, keep everybody on the team of raising those children as positive as possible along those lines. But then as you age, things get more complicated, and maybe there's a blended family and things like that, where the estate planning process becomes much more complicated because there's hers, mine, and ours, so to speak, from the old movie. And that makes things a little bit more complicated.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about wills. Obviously, you can work with an attorney. As you mentioned, there's some inexpensive ways to, especially simple wills, you can find online, things like that. Kind of the next step up is, after you've maybe accumulated some fairly decent wealth, you might want to look at that next step, which would be a trust, which is a little bit beyond. You would still have a will in place, but maybe tell us a little bit about what trusts are and why those are important as well.
Yeah, trusts, or a lot of people hear of trusts and just think they're for maybe the ultra wealthy, or I don't know, people that own a lot of ground, or but anyone can have a trust. It's a great way. It's biggest benefit, you avoid probate. Trust avoid probate, which is a pretty powerful thing, and it provides more control, when you're alive, of your assets. And then Bob, you can talk a little bit more about trust in general.
And that's a revocable living trust, and that does not protect the assets from creditors. Okay, so a lot of people, as they age, hear about, well, there's a trust that can protect your farm ground or can protect your assets, and those are irrevocable trusts. And an irrevocable trust means that you put your assets, let's say farm ground, into that trust, and after 5 years, if you go into a long-term care facility, and if you have and you run out of assets, that ground that's in your irrevocable trust cannot be attached to by the government in terms of taking care of your care. So most of the time, what we see are living trusts, and the benefit of them again are it helps you. It helps you leave your estate the way you want to, and to have those assets divided per your request, and it can be changed at any time, but you can put some guardrails in there that, for instance, if a child, one of your children would maybe get divorced or maybe have a lawsuit or something come up in the future where those assets in your trust cannot be attached to. So it all becomes quite simple on the surface, and it doesn't need to be complicated, but something that most people in Kansas that have a broad asset base probably need to have a living trust.
So obviously with the trust, it gets a little bit more complicated. So would you recommend that you work with an attorney when you're doing a trust, or what's your thoughts on that?
You know how taxes are nowadays, where you can put money, or there's a simple tax form. The IRS has an electronic filing you can do if you have a simple form. And I think accountants would tell you, yeah, go do that. Don't, we're busy doing more complicated tax returns. I think an attorney would say about wills, if you just need a simple will, that's probably a go to OfficeMax and buy one, fill it out and have it witnessed and be done with it. But once you start getting into, who's gonna, who would get this asset, or there's a special need that we have in there somewhere. Well, then you need to get an attorney involved, and I would absolutely, with a living trust, have an attorney involved, because with a living trust you also get wills, you also generally get medical power of attorney. Older folks like me get durable power of attorneys also, so that somebody can pay our bills and such if we become unable to do that. So yeah, having a professional attorney work with you is very important.
You bring up power of attorney, and that's kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about and there are a couple different powers of attorneys kind of categories out
Yeah.
there, but these are, they're a directive, so to speak. I'm retired military. Power of attorneys in the military were always a big thing. For example, I was deployed overseas, and my wife and I decided that we wanted to refinance our house, take advantage of the real low interest rates. She had my power of attorney, and so when it came to closing day, I was in Africa. She was able to go ahead and sign on my behalf with that power of attorney. So power of attorney kind of allows somebody to act on your behalf. You're giving them permission. There's very specific powers of attorney, and you can narrow it down to, I give a power of attorney to this person to do this very specific thing. Or you can have a general power of attorney, which basically you're giving them the power to sign on your behalf for anything. So you have to be very careful with a power of attorney on how much power you're giving somebody, but they are definitely a good tool for estate planning.
Yeah. And probably the common one is the healthcare directive, making sure that you have someone that you're, if something terrible happens, or if you're just in, older stages of your life, you want someone that is going to have your best wishes in mind when you're in a situation, where, they might have to make a tough situation. They have you in mind. So
One of the first three things they ask you when you're my age and you're checking into the hospital or to the doctor's office is, where's your health care directive? It's not, do you have one? It's, where is it? So
Yeah.
you kind of want to go, am I dying? Wait. No, you're fine, but we need to have that in case you are. Huh? Okay.
Well, and we see this in the real estate industry as well. A lot of times we're working with the family of somebody they're selling the house on behalf of one of their parents that's maybe in a nursing facility. So we see power of attorney a lot in the real estate industry as well. It's a very common, very important document.
yeah.
You mentioned healthcare directives. We'll kind of gloss over that one since you kind of touched about that. The final one is that we want to talk about is beneficiary designations, and this is important because, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but these have precedence over a will, and this would be like a 401k. You're going to name a beneficiary, and that beneficiary in that document takes precedence over what's in your will. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a good way to look at it is retirement plan products. So any retirement plan, 401k, 457, doesn't matter, IRA, they have beneficiaries, and insurance products have beneficiaries. And those, you can have a will that states that my children receive everything. You can have a 401k that you can leave your 401k to, somebody outside of that, of your children, if somebody wanted to. The key thing there is, and that's something I think is very important to talk about, a lot of times folks will come and visit with us, and they really can take care of most of their estate planning by just doing the beneficiaries properly and doing what are called, an acronym, a TOD or a POD, which is transfer on death and payable on death. So sometimes we'll sit down with folks and we'll get an attorney looped in with them and visit, and that's what we end up doing for them, is help them set all that up. So beneficiary designations are very important, and is our estate of a size that it's not too complicated. Maybe we have 2 children, we're going to leave half of it to each one of them, and so then all you need to do is POD, TOD, and get the beneficiaries right, and you're done.
Well, and then where it's also critically important here is, if you get a divorce, or maybe your spouse passes away and you get remarried, but updating those beneficiaries are critical because, once again, they take precedence. So if you've got an ex-spouse and you have them on your as a beneficiary,
401k,
yep,
you die.
They're getting it.
they're getting it.
Yeah, and have we seen that happen in 48 years? Yes, I have. I've seen that happen multiple times, and it's Yeah, and I don't know in those cases, was it on purpose or was it, because I don't know. But, again, so many times are blended families that, I believe I don't know what the percentage is today of marriages that end in divorce, but I think it's still over 50%. And thank you, my generation, for starting that path for everybody, of which I gladly participated. The fact that happens, it changes the dynamic of your estate, and all the time that dynamic enters into conversations, and it's just part of our. When I was a little kid, and the whisper word in little Onega, Kansas was that so-and-so was getting a divorce. I mean, that was like, holy cow. Nowadays it's not quite like that. But it is such a part of the fabric of basically everyone's lives now that you have to prepare for it. And that is where good estate planning attorneys come in and can just make everything so nice and clean and how the parents of that blended family want things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's a great segue because we also want to talk about not only what are some of these tools for estate planning, but we also want to talk a little bit about the timing of it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, if you have a child and you haven't got your estate documents in order, obviously a good time, but there's plenty of other times. Buying a house, getting a divorce, getting married. If you think about those major times in your life, those are probably good times to think about making sure your estate documents are in order.
Yeah, starting a business. Let's say you start making a bunch more money, and all of a sudden you're like, maybe it's time I, get my everything in order. Maybe it's a trust. But yeah, there's a lot of different, major life changes in general,
And why that's important is I don't know how many times we sat down with ag producers and what's going on? We bought another half section. Well, great. And well, did you put that into your trust? Well, I don't know whether we did or not. I can't remember. I can't remember what we did. And so, let's go check on that. And of course, we can all go to the county websites now and check. And you go check. And they just put it in joint tenancy. Well, if something happens to both of them, even though they have a trust in place that has all the other ground in it and all their home and all their assets are in their trust, if something happened to them and they're gone, their estate's going to go through probate. So they spent X thousands of dollars establishing this trust, and they're going to spend X thousands of dollars having that estate go through probate, which takes 6 months to a year. Just because they forgot to put that ground into a trust that they already had.
Yep.
And does that happen often? Yeah, because people forget they have it. People's biggest concerns about starting a trust are, well, how's that going to change my day-to-day life? And the answer is it doesn't. Yeah. It's very comfortable. You just keep writing checks the same way you always have. Your checkbook looks the same. You go put your checking account in the trust, but you don't have a check that says the so-and-so's living trust. It just looks like a joint tenants account. Well, over time, people forget they have a trust. And so that's why it's really important every time we meet with especially with larger clients that are always accumulating assets, to talk about what's been going on in your family. Are your kids all still married? Have you bought any more ground? And things like that.
Yeah, so there's definitely some key times, but you mentioned something else though. At some point, hopefully, a lot of folks will get to a point where they've accumulated enough wealth that it's like we need to start thinking about that next legacy piece of what we want to do with our wealth, and that's another good time, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So as we talk about the timing, but there's also the who, and it's pretty simple. We think of, if you're older and you don't have estate documents, you definitely need that. If you're a parent, we've already kind of mentioned that. What about a young adult? Do young adults need to think about estate documents?
If you're a young adult, like the biggest thing you'd probably think about is, something happens to me, having a healthcare directive still would be a pretty powerful thing still in your estate plan.
Yeah, if you're 21 years old and your desire is, if something were to happen, that you didn't want to linger for, maybe years in a medical facility on, life support, that healthcare directive could come
Yeah.
in very important.
Exactly.
So, Bob, what's the best way for somebody to get started if they've got to this point and they've decided, you know what, this is something I need to do? What would you recommend?
I think it's fairly simple. If you're in your 20s, you've gotten married, you've had a child, you need to do two things. You both need to have a will, and you need to go buy a cheap, inexpensive term insurance policy in case something happens to you. Okay, those two things. I mean, we can, break it down and simplify it as we go through stages. Let's say that we're in our 30s and we've had another child or another two children. Do we need some more life insurance? Buy term. Do not buy permanent life insurance. Buy term insurance. Buy it far enough out. Take care of your children's education. The 30s to your 50s, keep track of making sure your beneficiaries are correct. If you're accumulating, if you've bought a home and you're accumulating assets, like let's say a ag producer, farm ground, your 401k is getting bigger. You might need a trust somewhere in there. You're going to want to turn the page and do those things, but you're going to want to update your will at that time, and you're going to get those medical directives, powers of attorneys, things like that. So it's kind of a generational thing, and you can break it down. It can be very simple. Most of our clients that come in will set up an appointment with the attorneys. They'll go see them in about 2 months from whenever you're seeing this. If somebody made the phone call today to the attorney, it generally takes about 60 days to get in. Once they get in, about 30 days later, their trust is in effect, and they've deeded over. They've taken care of all the things, and that's for a living trust. And the irrevocable trust, that's layered later in life. And of course, then once we hit my age, you're looking at making sure that trust is set up the way it needs to be for estate planning purposes. But also, that's when we start talking about gifting. Gifting to charities and gifting to our children, maybe. I like to call it giving with warm hands.
Great. Well, Bob, thank you very much. And of course, you can always meet with Mark and Bob, and they can help you get started on that process as well. Give you some advice maybe on where you are in your stage of life. So go to bobschwartzfinancial.com, and you can find out more about the services that they provide, how to get in touch with them. And of course, they have offices in Victoria and Silver Lake, Kansas. So gentlemen, thank you. Very important episode today. Lots of good information. Once again, if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We would appreciate that. And wherever you're getting your podcast, if you're watching us there or listening to us there, we would love a review. It helps with the algorithm. So gentlemen, thanks, and have a great day.
Yep,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.